Treat me like a dog. Treat me like a dog. Treat me like a dog.
Anyway, a very, very warm welcome in what is a freezing cold morning to the start of winter today up here in Edinburgh. So this is the second question time. The first one was a great hit, and hopefully we're going to make these a series. Matt hosted the first one, so thanks again for joining us, Matt, today. We
Very
have
welcome.
Sheila, Anne-Marie, and Lara. Is Lara here?
Yes.
Can't see you, Lara. Where are you? Oh, there she is. Lovely Lara is here. In a second or two, I'll hand over to Matt, but I want to give it a bit of context first. I've come across a bit of a theme recently where landlords are asking me how we get the basics right, but at the same time move forward, with technology and innovation. And it's come up in a recent show event we had with Matt and Sheila, and Anne-Marie was there as well. And we had a whole discussion about it. And then it's just stuck in my head. So what I want to do today is discuss about basics versus innovation, not necessarily in a conflict, can they coexist, etc. So with no further ado, I will check Jo, maybe something's come up with her, and there's an email in my inbox. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Matt Baird from the Social Housing Roundtable and many other activities. Matt, over
Thank
to
you very much, Dave. Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's lovely to be involved today. And as you say, it was a really good conference down at the Southeast Consortium where we, obviously saw the panel that kind of kicked off today's show. So I'm Matt Baird. I'm the founder of the Social Housing Roundtable, which is a weekly networking event that takes place every Tuesday on Zoom between 11 and 12. It's totally free, and we've hosted about 140, 150 sessions now. So if anyone wants to get involved with that later down the line, do reach out. I'm also co-chair of the board for Spring Housing in Birmingham, a fantastic homeless charity that recently merged with St Anne's Hostel to become a registered provider. So I'm soon to be chair of St Anne's, and my co-chair will be chair of Spring. So we're going to split those, but for now, still co-chair. And I have been recruiting in the social housing space for about 13 years. So speak with people day in, day out from all levels in housing to really just get a feel for how they're thinking about the sector and what's going on. So hopefully a wide breadth of input that I can kind of offer. So we've got three of our panelists with us today. If Jo joined us, I'll obviously go over, but I'm just going to kind of go through our panelists to do a bit of a kind of 2-minute intro, really, in terms of why they wanted to get involved with today's panel, what the thoughts are in terms of, getting the basics right versus innovation and everything kind of in between. So Anne-Marie, I've got you first on my screen. Do you want to dive in first and do a bit of an intro on yourself, and I guess what brings you to the conversation today?
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt, for that lovely introduction. So my name is Anne-Marie, and now I wear many different hats at the moment. So one of my hats I wear is I work with the Disruptors Innovation Network, which some of you might know. It's the largest corporate innovation membership group for housing providers, and I manage the property channel. Obviously, I'm a big fan of innovation, so great topic today. But also, for my sins, I'm still a housing practitioner, so I still work in housing associations. I normally work at the exec level and manage anything from operations through, customer homes, assets, even some corporate central services. So that's basically what I do, and then I do a bit of consultancy on the side through my organisation that's called Ikiden. So so I always have to remember, depending on what call I'm on, which hat I need to go get out of the cupboard and wear in that context.
No,
Thank
that's feeling
you.
very, very well. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Yeah.
Sheila, over to yourself.
Hi there. Yeah, nice to be here. I have worked in housing for over 20 years, and I led a major transformation team and IT, but with a customer service in mind, because that's where my background was with professionalism in customer service. And I'm quite passionate about the fact that we should be embracing the future. And we can talk as we go about what innovation actually means and getting the basics right. But I'm here because I've got quite a lot to say on it. And I'm not actually working in housing at the moment. I'm now a career coach, so I actually help women to get that next level job. But most of my clients work in housing, and what I see is things not changing and the frustration that comes with that. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you very much, Sheila. And Lara.
Hi everyone. I've still got a bit of a cold, so I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, can you?
Yeah, we can.
My voice may dip in and out every now and then. So my name's Lara Idele. Again, like Anne-Marie, I wear numerous hats, and I'm not sure which hat I'm wearing today, but I'm wearing this night red velvet one. So I come to this conversation as someone who grew up as a council tenant, got a council flat, worked for housing associations and homelessness authorities. So I grew up in the sector, been in the sector for over 30 years. And then as someone who now is a landlord who has other people depending on me for their security, and as someone who has two elderly parents who lived in a retirement living facility. And I try to look at what the sector does from that customer point of view, having been a different kind of customer in so many levels, in so many places. And I think I'll just start the conversation by saying I don't think the question is a valid one, because you cannot do one without the other. You need both. Life is consistently about change. And even if you decide not to change, the universe will change around you and drag you along. There you go.
Well, that was going to be, I mean, I was going to go to someone to kind of kick off the conversation, Lara. So actually that really kind of helps. In terms of the topic itself then, do you feel that it's something which the sector takes seriously enough as a conversation, or do you feel that it's, you know, we're kind of spinning our wheels with it a bit? I'll carry on, Lara, and then I'll go back through the panel.
Well, I think it's one of the how can I put this? One of the issues that I think the sector has, and I think all professionals, and I say professionals in quote, have this, where we define things and we put things into categories. So we'll have organizational transformation, which is a thing over here, and then we have finance, and then we have property management, and then we have tenant participation, and they're all sort of doing their own, you know, we define them as different departments and different things that need to be done. Whereas generally speaking, all those things overlap and interrelate. So I think this is not unique to it's not unique to the housing sector. I think one of the issues we're discussing here is the silo mentality of how we provide a service, because you got to consider the technology and the finance and the people, the et cetera, of whatever this thing is you want to do. But we tend to divide things. I can't speak properly. Divide is what I'm trying to say. Divide things into different departments. So that's how I'd say part of the issue is.
Thank you, Lara. I'll give you a break for your voice for just a moment. So Anne-Marie, I mean, the topic obviously is basics versus innovation. What are your thoughts on that, and maybe some of the thoughts that Lara shared as well? Obviously with the innovation network, obviously it's a really strong perspective to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start by maybe giving a bit of a window of the experience I have with the Disrupted Innovation Network, because part of my job, I get paid to speak to exec directors all the time. And so it's really, really interesting to see their perspective on things and, you know, get a broad, you know, not all members are the same, but the common theme that I've seen from most exec directors are looking after the, you know, homes and the assets this year is they are so bogged down by the here and the now. They talk to me about repairs. They talk to me about damp and mold. They talk to me about our law coming in. And of course, those things are really important. That is, like, you know, our repair service is the biggest service we provide to our tenants, and that will be a bigger driver into your customer satisfaction. But what's a little bit sad to me when I have those conversations is, yes, they're in the here and the now, but I feel that a lot of them aren't able to just stand back a little bit. I'm not saying we shouldn't do the basics and we shouldn't get those things right, but I don't think there's enough recognition in those conversations that, well, how are we going to get out of that sort of hamster wheel? Because you'll just keep on focusing on that. But how do you stand back, and how do they create a little bit of space, head space, because we do need to think about these things, actually. That links in with Lara's comment about, you know, looking across the piece, not just looking in small silos. I sense a lack of time and headspace to actually stand back and just think a little bit more carefully. So it's only the plan in the moment. We just need to get the repairs, and we need to get the repairs down. But I'm fearful that actually the world's going to move on, and they're going to keep on trying the same things. They're probably not going to work. They're not looking across and wider, and also how they're developing their teams, working below them to be, you know, really good. so that they can get that headspace to think about things in a slightly different way. So I think that's my experience from talking to loads of people out there. And I appreciate that. I do that in my day job as well. It's really difficult. So I'll stop now. I don't want to say all my good things in the first go, Matt.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. David said to me everybody was getting about 2 minutes, and I haven't even had to keep anyone in time yet. This is absolutely wonderful. Thank you, everybody. So Sheila, same question for you, really. Thoughts on basics v innovation as a topic and as a discussion point for housing in general?
Yeah, so I think the word innovation is probably overused and perhaps misunderstood. What does it actually mean? It's like transformation, culture change, all of these things. We band these terms out there, but I don't think anybody really sits down and says, what do we mean by innovation? And I think we absolutely need to get the basics right. But what does that actually mean? I think the basics have changed. I mean, they probably haven't changed in as much as, basics is going out and doing the repair, answering a call, answering the query, housing people. But the way we do it has definitely changed. I mean, the world has changed. It shouldn't be like you have to write in to make a complaint, or, you have to phone up to get the answer to something. Why isn't the information available to people? Because the world is much more digital now. And I think there are there's some probably risk averse people out there that don't want to be the first, and I absolutely get that. Way back when I was implementing contact centres 25 years ago, being the first was always a bit worrying and a bit dangerous, but we're not being the first anymore. Everybody, that whole industry, not just this sector, in fact, not this sector, but I mean, I was thinking earlier, when was the last time I went to the post office to tax my car, get a passport? I mean, it all goes online. The car doesn't even have a tax disc in it anymore, because it's all online. And yet we're working in a sector where actually there's still a lot of paper, there's still a lot of spreadsheets. So for me, I think let's stop using the word innovation. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think there is innovation that we need to be thinking about, much bigger things around smart tech, about how we build homes. And I think we do need to be thinking about that now, because otherwise in 30 years time, we're going to be having the same conversation. But when we talk about basics, how do we communicate with our customers? How do we provide the services? It's about continuous improvement, not necessarily innovation. And I think innovation scares people a little bit. And I completely agree with what Anne-Marie was saying about time. We have to build that time in. I think it has to become business as usual. That continuous improvement needs to become business as usual.
Couldn't agree more. And I think it's some really interesting points, actually. And I think that idea around the way we do basics has changed, not what the basics are, is a really kind of powerful message probably for the group in general today. So we've had 3 questions that have come through, and then we're going to answer those with our panel. And then if anyone has any others, please do put them in the chat. I can already kind of see some amazing points for me to raise shortly, so that'd be fantastic. So I'm going to give Lara's voice just a little bit longer to rest. I'll go Anne-Marie, Sheila and Lara, so you got a chance there to rest your voice. But the first question that came through, Anne-Marie, was, do we think housing is stuck in a rut, simply firefighting, and therefore being innovative is too much to ask? Or do we think innovation is truly something we can aspire to achieve?
Yeah, I wonder if we are, I'm always going to lean towards innovation. I know, appreciate it's overused and everything, and it can mean different things. But I do think we are stuck in a rut a little bit. I think we are. I'm just so worried we're going to keep on falling further and further behind, because the world and the rate of change in the world around us is so fast and it's exponential. And so if we don't somehow keep up, I fear we'll turn into these massive dinosaurs, will become a massive headache for people. I feel so passionately for our, tenant, customer, resident, whatever you choose to call it, call them. I've learned a very hard lesson last week about, how residents feel not being called, not a customer sometimes. And I dread what their experience might be like in years to come if we do not keep up with the times, and they're not going to compare us to, the other landlord that they're never going to have potentially. They are, their expectations are continuously raised in the outside world for other service providers that aren't providing housing, and so might have a maybe slightly easier job than we do. And so for me, it feels like their expectations are going up and up and up, and we're here, we're trying to get the basics right, fine. But is that gap going to continue to go further and further? you know, away from each other. So are we stuck in a rut? Well, our founder Ian sometimes saying no one's going to take innovation seriously until a chief exec sat for it. That's also a very controversial view, I think. Matt, what was the last part of your question? So it's stuck in a rut, and
Yeah, and it was it's being innovative too much to ask.
yeah. I think I guess I would say that the question isn't that. Oh, sorry. Thank you. The question, I think the question is, are we having the right conversations at the most senior levels of the organization? Because I think if you want to be a bit more forward thinking, you want to have a culture of continuous improvement, or you want to push the boundaries a little bit on innovation. I think if the board and the executive don't make a conscious decision about that, how can we get that as part of the fabric and the culture of the organization? So I think everybody has to be on the same page. And I think I need to follow through perhaps the values of the organization. I was looking at an organization last night and they say, well, we want to be forward thinking, for example. Some say in their values they want to be innovative, others have it absent. So I think unless we make a conscious decision at that top, how is our teams and our senior leaders, like Sheila was saying, how do they know how to apportion their time and start applying their thinking processes if they don't actually know this is a cultural or strategic envelope within which they're operating? So if you don't know that there's appetite and we want to push a little bit on that side, then how are you going to align your time, your resources, your energy if you don't actually know, you're rudderless?
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. So Sheila, over to you. It was, like I say, are we stuck in a rut simply firefighting, and being innovative is too much to ask?
Yeah, I definitely think stuck in a rut. Most housing associations, I think, are stuck in a rut, and I get it. Why? Because there's so much going on at the moment, and I think that COVID didn't help. I mean, I think COVID helped with some innovation because it helped people work from home, people move to the cloud and things like that. But actually, the whole backlog of everything that happened in COVID, I think, has left people firefighting. And I think they're spending so much time firefighting that they haven't got the capacity to actually think about how things could be done better. And the ironic thing about it is, in my view, is that actually I think technology, actually just reviewing processes and the things that they've done, actually could free up time and make them more efficient. And I mean, we talk a lot about customers, and I'm a big fan of obviously providing great services for customers and making it easy for them. But actually, there's also a piece here about making it easier for colleagues, because actually, if we can streamline, automate some of the processes and that the colleagues have, then they'll be freed up to have more time. And I really feel that they are firefighting down in the details at the moment. So I think there is a moment, and it might have to be a painful moment because there's always that crossover, isn't there, where you have to invest the time in making something better, but that might make something a little bit worse just while you're spending the time on it, because I'm assuming that nobody here has got the time or the funding to go out and actually create this whole new team or get all this new resource to do what we're suggesting. But I think there is this crossover, and I think sometimes we're a bit short-sighted. It's a bit like, isn't it, when you say, I'll just do it myself because it's easier and quicker rather than training somebody else to do it. It's that same premise. Actually, I think we need to find the time and the capacity to make things better. I think that will improve the basics, and I think it will free people up, colleagues up. It'll improve the customer process. But I'm just not seeing that at all at the moment. I think people literally are firefighting. And of course, there's huge risks with all the things that have happened, with some of the white papers and some of the, disasters that have happened. But actually, again, I think some of those things could have been avoided if we'd moved with the times and actually implemented, new technology, new processes. So yeah, I think yes, we are stuck in a rut.
Lara, any additional thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to argue that I don't fundamentally disagree with anything that Anne-Marie and Sheila have said. However, I disagree that the sector is stuck in a rut. I agree that the sector is firefighting, but we're not stuck in a rut because we haven't got the choice. People have been saying we're stuck in a rut since I became conscious of my housing experience in the 90s. We've been constantly stuck in a rut. That's not a rut if you're constantly stuck in it. We're just behind the curve, is what I think. We're behind the curve, and we've been responsive to issues rather than being proactive, innovative. Well, I don't want to use that word. Proactive or trying to anticipate what could happen before it happens, if you know what I mean. So it's one of the conversations I have in boardrooms when we look at risk maps. We always look at risk maps of stuff that's already happened. So, and then we're not really looking at things that haven't happened or may happen or could happen because we don't know about it. So if you think of 2019, who had COVID or a pandemic on their risk map? Nobody. A few months later, everybody had it at the top. But I'm like, well, it's not really a risk; it's already here. Do you know? So we, you know, we know what it is. And then the next thing was, what's that? The concrete buildings falling down. That was on top of everybody's risk map, and then it's moved. So it's almost like we need to be more visionary about what could happen given what we've got in situ, rather than constantly reacting. So what you guys are calling stuck in a rut, I'm calling being constantly reacting and responding to things rather than trying to predict what may happen. And I have one last point is talking about this as a board member. I've discussed many times in the last sort of 2 to 3 years. I'm saying we all need to be looking at how we're going to embed AI in our organizations. Do we want people to use AI? Are people going to use AI? Do we care? It's there. We need to start talking about it. I've been talking about this for 2 years. Everybody's now clamoring and trying to get their act together now because you've got Copilot and ChatGPT. And, you know, my 14-year-old niece is using it to create stuff, you know, and now we're like, oh my God, we need to sort out what we're going to do about AI. Do you know what I mean? Whereas we didn't see it. Well, I saw it come in, but everybody's like, oh, it's not a thing. It's fine. We won't worry about it. And now here we are. Everybody's rushing around like headless chickens trying to work out what their organizational position is on AI, when I think it's a bit too late now because people are using it on their phones and people are using it on their iPads. And, you know, what you put in place now is responding to that situation rather than anticipating the impact. I'll shut up now.
No need to shut up, but it's certainly an interesting point. And some of the questions I was noting down there, I think this idea of keeping up is really, really challenging when you're going up against a sector that potentially has more money and funds with which to do it. I think it's also sometimes, and some of the points in the chat have lent towards this, there are some tenants who are digitally disengaged, not using internet and the rest of it. There are some that are far more digitally engaged than those working in housing, and certainly than some of the chief execs in housing. And so our expectations are very, very different. And I think using the term tenant or customer as a broad term, the vastness and the width there is so broad, it's very, very difficult. And as I say, I think there are some chief execs who want to embrace and want to engage and everything else, but don't understand some of these terminologies. There are people certainly, you know, of all ages and backgrounds who just don't get what some of this tech actually does and how it works, and have had bad experiences with some tech. And so therefore going, well, actually, is this worth the gamble? Is this going to work this time? How's it all going to match up? So it's really, really interesting hearing this. And you can see from the chat, there's lots and lots of interesting points being made. Kai said the sector moves faster than how the information is related to tenants. Not enough time is always given to keep up. Dave mentioned obviously the basics are having up-to-date procedures and processes. Rupert, sector-specific experts can help level up the basics, allowing HASLTs to focus on what comes next. And, you know, as Kai's mentioned, a lot of RP say you can report pairs online, which is great, but the basic is, does the tenant even have the internet to make that repair? And I will come back to some of the other points in the chat as we go through. But as Aklak mentioned, this is a big problem. I've been trying to get data sharing with associations. They don't want to share as they think it's competitive. So we realize data sharing is advantageous in improving the sector, nothing will change. So going back to Anne-Marie with the second question that come through, can we afford to keep on waiting to get the basics right? Or do we need to take a leap of faith in innovating? Would love to hear your thoughts.
So links in with what we've been talking about already this morning is, can we afford to wait? I think if we go back to what are the basics, they're very basic, aren't they? And, you know, we're not housing associations didn't start up 3 years ago. We've been around for a long time, and we're still struggling to do the basics, you know, not having our processes in place and systems aren't working properly. We can't get our DLOs to perform in the way we need. So for me, it's like, I mean, we could still be having this same conversation in 5 years' time. Well, I really, really hope I'm not sitting here in 5 years' time and get invited to talk about the same topic. But you can see I worry about that because, you know, these are not things that are new. These are not things that are new to do. Yes, they are stretching because the world's changing and things have happened that's raising the bar a little bit, but they are really fairly basic stuff that we should have in place. So I think we can't really afford to wait. So I do think about this twin track that we should be on. We do need to get some of those basic things sorted out. I absolutely agree with that, but that cannot be the only thing we do. It can't be the only thing we do. And if we just thinking about, say, for example, we've got a repairs backlog, and all our efforts are just going into, okay, how do we do this repairs backlog? Okay, we'll get more operatives. And we just sort of in that sort of spiral and just going round in circle. We might be able to get the backlog completed and stuff, but I feel like the problem's going to go somewhere else next, because we can't sustain that potentially, and we have missed out on other technologies. For example, there's a large language model called Aiden that's now been trained and can diagnose problems. You can either deploy it, with your customers directly or in your call center behind the scenes. We've got, models where you've got retired gas engineers that can diagnose and fix, repair, gas related problems remotely, and you can cut your gas, sort of call out to the property by 30%. There's all these things, and if we, it's fine if you're trying to deal with the basics and you are thinking about those things as well. But if you're not, then by the time you sort of think you've got things under control, the world, continues to move on, and we're not grasping that, pulling that into the problem solving. So I think, it really is like we just really can't wait anymore. And I think some of our conversation and our thinking really should be thinking about that. Like Laura said, we're behind track already because we didn't embrace AI when it came in. We didn't think ahead, and now we're sort of going, oh, okay, everyone else is using it, but we're not quite deploying it in the way we can. Or we could have deployed even on some of our processes. So there's so many opportunities. But to finish off, Matt, I was just thinking, do we have the right skills in our organisation? So I'll put my hand up. I'm getting a bit long in the tooth now. Do I understand AI well enough? Am I digitally savvy enough to even understand what we can harness and achieve and take from the world that exists to actually drive our organizations forward? I don't think even I know. So do we have the right skill sets in our organizations? So one of the organizations I worked before, I brought a head of data in, and it was like, he was amazing, but he spoke a different language in the organization, and people just, his skill set was so low, including my own, that I feared he would leave the organization and our sector, because no one can engage with him at that level and see the things he's seeing, the opportunities he can see, and therefore he'll end up just fizzling out and leaving, like so we see some others do. So I think, sorry, there was a mouthful there, Matt, but I think so many of these things are really interlinked with each other.
I agree completely. I think the skill shortage is a massive one. And as you say, and it goes back to that point I briefly made before around chief execs and who's leading a business. It's who in your business is really understanding those steps through. And I like the fact that you said, actually, we brought a head of data who knew, but no one else did. So how are you engaging? How are you understanding? But also, how are you scrutinizing? How are you making sure that actually you're bringing in the right piece of tech at the right time for the right part, when sometimes it comes down to salespeople? And I think that was the point. I know when this conversation kicked off when we're at the Southeast Consortium was actually when tech providers are trying to sometimes explain this to people in the industry, it's understanding they don't speak the same language. They don't always understand exactly the nuances of what's going on. But if you can talk about how the products can fix the basics, I believe there's a better chance there. But this is where that basics innovation bit comes in. And as Rupert mentioned in the chat, as innovation marches ever forward, the gap will widen as you struggle to keep up with the basics. And I think that's really important. But Sheila, I'm going to bring you in on that question of, can we afford to keep on waiting to get the basics right, or do we need to take a leap of faith in innovation?
Yeah, I think we absolutely have to take a leap of faith. And I don't think it's much of a leap of faith, because I think that the technology is out there. I think it's proven now. It's nothing new. So, I mean, I became a head of digital transformation 9 years ago at an organisation, and we were looking at AI, Internet of Things, and all of that back then. We did some work on it. We did some basic stuff which would have worked, but the organisation was too risk averse. They didn't want to invest in it. People didn't understand it, and now they're back where they were, 10 years ago. And I think that's the risk that we've got here. I think the problem at the moment is that sometimes in an organisation, they might have one person like me or, who is really keen to do that. But unless it's actually brought into at the highest level and the funding, it's not even just about the money, it's about the belief. And actually it's about freeing people up around the whole organisation to work on what the future is. And I've always been a big fan of each business area should know, should have people there that I know we can do this better. How can we do it better? But they can't be allowed to do it on their own, because that comes back to the silos. And I've seen where people have gone off, just their department have gone off to a supplier, found a system, implemented a system, and it just hasn't sat with anything else in the organization. It hasn't integrated with anything else. So, for me, I think there does need to be almost like whatever you call it, let's call it a transformation team just for the sake of ease for the moment, but a team of people that lead, but they lead across the whole organization. They've got the resources, they've got the funding, they can look at what basics do we need to improve now to get it right, but how can that link into what we need in the future? So we're not building something that only works for now. It needs to be something that might happen in the future. I mean, AI is out there now, but this was around 10 years ago. If somebody had been looking at it now, they might have been thought, oh, at some stage, this is probably going to progress. How can we make sure our systems allow for that? So I think there is, I think that we absolutely have to do it, or else we will be having this conversation. I mean, I'm having this conversation today, which is a conversation that I had 10 years ago. And I'm pretty sure we will be having it again in 10 years' time if something doesn't change. I don't know how we get it to change, because I think there is a whole just tradition of like just always working the way that we've worked. And I think little things change, but not enough. And if you don't mind, I would just like to make one point about the business about vulnerable customers and people who aren't online, because obviously they do exist, but they're not so many now, because most people, have got some form of digital access. So for me, it's like, we're not removing services from people who can't access online. We absolutely don't do that. But we shouldn't be stopping the development of digital services for them, because otherwise what we're doing is penalising 90% of the community based on the 10% who perhaps need a bit more help. And I also know there's a lot of vulnerable people out there who don't want to talk to you, but actually they'll happily press buttons on an iPad. Let's give them apps and things. So I think, we have to take in the whole picture. We can't make that an excuse. We can't use vulnerable customers as an excuse not to develop. I think we have to we just take them into account as we're building new services. And then we build it so that it suits everybody. And technology will enable us to do that.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Lara, your thoughts on, can we afford to keep on waiting to get the basics right, or do we need to take a leap of faith?
Oh, a couple of things. The definition of basics, and I just want to answer Sheila's question about whether we're going to be discussing this in 10 years' time, and I'm saying we will, because we've been discussing it for every 10 years, each of the 10 years that I've been in the sector, and that's at least 3, because I remember when I was working when computers were introduced to the housing office I was at, and all the staff went on strike. I was this bright young thing. I was a teenager. I thought, oh, what's this box on the table? Oh, let's press some buttons. Oh my God, I can look at rent accounts. Just put in the reference numbers. Oh, look, this is the future. I'm going to be going to space next. And all the staff went on strike because they said it was going to give you cancer. We're all going to lose our jobs. It's the thin edge of the wedge. The union hated it. And then the whole discussion around the organization at the time, it was a local authority, was how do we integrate this new technology called computers into the work that we do? Now look at us 30 years down the line. We take checking up your rent account online for granted. It's standard fare. And I feel that in 10 years' time, we'll be having the same conversation, but on a slightly different issue. It'll be, I don't know, I imagine it'll be taught about biometric identification as standard fare or something like that, which is just happening now, which will be standard practice in 10 years' time. That's just my prediction for the future. Talking about basics, the question is, what do we consider the basics to be? So as a tenant and a leaseholder and the daughter of tenants, one of the basics that we want is adequate communication with our landlord. Yeah, the right communication at the right time, telling us what we need to do, responsive and useful. Okay, because sometimes we get communication that means nothing. We don't understand the terminology, understand what it's talking about. It means nothing. So the question then is, getting communication right, is that being innovative, or is that just firefighting? I'm asking an open question there, But the question is, I want the right communication at the right time in the right format that tells me what I need to do, and I don't have to open a dictionary to understand what you're talking about. Now, this has been the issue since we were doing, remember those photocopiers with ink where you had to turn it? I don't know how old you people are in the room. Since those days when we were photocopying and we had to put your memo in your letterbox in the corridor of the office, to sending multiple emails, to now using WhatsApp, and some organizations have an app. The question is, are we telling the residents what they need at the right time? Do they understand it? Does it make sense? Those are the basics to me. And innovation comes alongside those. You can't help it. So I'll just give you an example. I was in a boardroom the other day. There's an issue here about if you have the same people in the same place, you talk about the same things. So there's an issue that I'm going on about nowadays about having, I call it diversity in the boardroom, but I'm not just talking about ethnicity. I'm talking about age and exposure. Because I had a conversation in the boardroom the other day, and someone said the word catfishing, and the other board member said, "What's that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean you don't know what catfishing is? You need to watch more TV." Okay, but that's a generation thing. I know what catfishing is. Those people in the boardroom were all older than me, didn't have a clue what catfishing is. And that's just an example of communication and using a phrase and a terminology that they don't understand. Whereas I imagine probably 50% of the residents of that organization are using that phrase, if you understand me. So, and then the opposite could be the reverse. The opposite could be the same. They use a phrase that no one understands, like Section 20 notice. What's that when it's at home? I know what it means, but does my mum know what it means when I write her a letter? So I'll just stop there. Yeah, the other one was ghosting as well. They didn't know what ghosting was, but there you go.
Thank you, Lara. I think it's really interesting. I think on that idea of, can we afford to keep on getting the basics right? I agree. I think the problem is the basics have changed in 10 years, never mind 20, 30 years. I think this idea of, if I go back, when I first started in housing, universal credit was just coming in. All these pieces were just coming in. If you go back even to when I was, going through school, the fact that, I would be expected to be online every single minute of every day of everywhere I walked. So if I have a request and I put a request in, someone should get back to me because they should be able to. That was unheard of. That's now a basic in housing. It's a case of if I called, I should be able to speak to someone, not just a robot. If I speak to a robot, it should be done immediately. The speed with which we expect now has massively changed. So basics have changed with it. And I think when we're looking at basics, realistically, we're talking about healthy homes that are available for all, that are affordable. Well, that's got loads and loads of challenges within it as well. And the problem, I think, with housing in the country is that as much as we'd love to be more innovative in so many ways, so many homes aren't fit for purpose. We're fighting that. And then we've got all of the changes coming in with the consumer standards and our law and everything else that's coming through that are all absolutely necessary, and everything is absolutely required. The idea of trying to bring on more is very difficult, even if that more will save us time in the long run. And I think that's sometimes where the challenge is. And I agree with Lara's point there around age and people understanding actually what's available. Sometimes we're so bogged down, we go, I haven't got time to talk about that. When actually over a period of time, if we spend the money now, it will save us loads of time and loads of money in the long run, but it's scary. And it's an interesting one, because the third question that came through, and I guess this is intentionally open, and Anne-Marie, I'll start with yourself again, is what do you think the basics of housing are, and what can you give some examples?
Yeah, I think interesting on Lara's view on what the basics are. I think for me, it's centered around the home and that customer service. So for me, it's, let's be honest, the majority of what we do as housing associations is make sure that home is in a good state of repair. We've got to meet some basic, decent home standards, for example. I'd hope as associations we will be aiming much higher than that, because it's quite a low bar. You can meet the decent home standards and it could still be not a very nice place to live. I've seen some examples of homes that meet that standard, but they are dreadful. I wouldn't want anyone to live there. So for me, it's around that, that repair piece. So I think I always try and put myself in a customer's shoe. That's their home. It's their home. And it'd be nice to live there, nice to go home, about they go out, they come back. So it's that repair piece. And I know that got how we manage ASB. I'm just thinking from an ops director perspective now, the key services you basically have, and then it's that customer service piece around picking up the phone if customers wish to ring in, or providing other service on other channels, whether that's a an app or a web-based portal or whatever that might be. So it's that. And then I think I agree with Laura. It's the way we communicate with our residents. And gosh, we just don't seem to be able to get that right. There's so many tools available to us now, but I just don't know why. Sometimes it feels to me like what we as leaders think, what we know we can do. I don't know if there's something built in thinking that for our customers that's not important, or somehow why aren't we giving that to them? Why aren't we thinking in a different way? Not in a different way, like what we expect, but is it some sort of stigma involved? Isn't that no, it's social housing, so therefore we must just reach this level. We mustn't think any, let's not go beyond, let's not deploy the more innovative, more, I'm saying innovation's not the right word, just the technology that is available and that we'd expect to use. I don't know if that's also wedged somewhere. I don't know, I might not be giving justice to my sector, but I do wonder about that side, that sometimes as well. Is there some sort of inbuilt thing that this is good enough? Well, it's not truly good enough when you match that back to the real world. But yeah, for me, that's the basics. That's the basic things. Installing kitchens, but it's the stuff that we've been doing for a long time, for many years, and it's just that really we should just be able to have a clear process, and it should 95% of the time it should really just go well. Those are the basics to me.
Sheila, I mean, but thank you very much, Anne-Marie, on that. So, I mean, the question was obviously, can you give some examples of what the basics are? I guess the other side, I can come back to Anne-Marie on this point just while I was thinking about it, which was, what are the basics? And I guess, have they changed?
I don't think probably basics have changed. And I think I kind of want to split this into two, if that's all right. Because I think for me, there's
Please
the
do, yeah.
basics, that there is a basics of like the home. We're housing these people, we're providing them with a home. And I think there are some basics around, why have I not got a carpet when I move in? I mean, still bemuses me. But so for me, I think there's definitely basics around like the home, the environment that you're in, the safety that you've got, that whole piece around basics. We are housing people so that they have got a home that they should be able to flourish in, really, to have a good life in. And I think that those basics, I think there is probably still some work to do on those basics, but ultimately I think as a sector we do kind of want to house people, and then I think for me the other basics is around the service. So, and that I guess is what fits into really what we're talking around today about around technology. And it's not all about technology. I think it is about process. I think it is about language, because absolutely, how many times have you seen a letter where it's full of jargon that nobody understands? It's not written to a real person. We should be able to write that letter in a friendly tone and get the results that we want from people. I think that the basics are all about communication, about like us listening to the customer, properly understanding what they want, but then communicating with them in the way that they choose. Is that an app? Is that a portal? Do they want to talk? Some people love picking up the phone and they want to talk. That's great, but when they do, has the customer service person got all of the information that they need to hand? Can they actually action something there at that moment, confirm an appointment? Why aren't we tracking tradesmen so that we know when that person's coming in? We don't have to keep taking calls about chasing when's my tradesman going to arrive. So I think there's a process thing, there's a language thing, and there is definitely a technology thing that can help with all of that. So for me, basics from a service point of view is mainly around how we communicate, how we provide that information to people, and how we actually deliver it. So, part of it's about the information the customer gets, part of it's about information that the colleague gets. What systems and processes and tech have they got in place to make it easy for them to provide a great service to the customer, because ultimately the customer wants to ring and get their repair, pay their rent, get their question answered. So for me, that answers the question, and that's what basics are.
Thank you very much. Lara, over to yourself. It's what are the basics of housing, and I guess have they changed and evolved? And it kind of follows on a little bit from some of the points you made in your previous statement, but I still think it's worth us really kind of deep diving into a little bit.
Oh, well, I may not be deep diving. I might be taking a slightly different route here. I wanted to observe that based on the people on the panel, we sort of agree on what the basics are. Then you've got the basics, like the proper basics, and then they're maybe not so basic. Because I imagine if we had a finance director in this room and a HR person and an ASB person, they might come up with some other basics that we've not thought about, because while you two were talking, I thought, well, what can I say that's different from Sheila and Anne-Marie? Then I thought, well, the fundamental basics is if we don't have the money to provide the service that we're providing, then we won't exist. So I guess as a former rent collector, as a former housing officer, I say we're getting the rent from the tenants is a basic. So the definition of basics can vary so much because, like I said, without the money in the bank, housing associations wouldn't exist, and then we can't do all these other wonderful things we can do. Just trying to be different there, but anyway, that's the point. So what was the other part of the question, Mark?
It's whether you think basics have changed or evolved over time.
No, the basics haven't changed. Housing associations are set up to house people, hopefully give them secure and good quality homes. Back in the olden days, we were always seen as better landlords than local authorities, and we've sort of lost our way since then. So the basics are exactly the same as they are in terms of housing people, giving them secure homes, safe homes. And we talked about communication. There's lots of other basics that you could think of, but I think those for me are the basics, if that makes sense. And then it's how we make those happen. So the other thing I'd like to add to the conversation is I'm going to suggest that this is unique to housing, but I'm sure my friends in education will say the same, and my friends in the NHS would say the same. But I think because the product we are selling, so to speak, is buildings, houses, homes, estates, they're not something you can turn around in 6 months. You know, the core of what we provide is a long-term strategic entity. So if you've got an estate of properties, 800 properties on there, you know, once those properties are there, you're stuck with it, so to speak. And it's how much innovation and change and creativity you can implement in that space. It's not the same as if you're, I'm going to contradict myself here, as say if you're Amazon and you're selling tomatoes online. You know, if those tomatoes don't work, you can get tomatoes from somewhere else. Or you can say, we're not selling tomatoes today. Today we're going to be selling onions, and tomorrow we're going to be selling milk. And Amazon will still continue to exist as a supplier of fresh vegetables. Whereas with housing, our product is bigger, clunkier, and not so easy to swap around. So I do think that that is often why those of us that have been in the sector for so long get sort of stuck in our ways, because we've got to make sure that everything, the old stuff that we've inherited, continues to exist. And then with that comes the fear of doing anything different, because you've got to maintain these buildings and make sure our residents live in decent homes. Then you're focusing on damp and mold and repairs, and that you just go around in this vicious cycle. So now I'm going to contradict myself, Mark, if I'm allowed to. So when I think of housing, I also think of my relationship with the commercial companies Next, Argos, M&S, and Amazon. And I list those 4 organizations because I spend a lot of money with all 4 of them, even though I disagree with Amazon politics and Next. I'm trying to wean myself off their shopping. But when things go wrong, I know that I can reach out to them in various formats. If I finally speak to an individual, they have the capacity, the power, the authority to deal with the problem there and then. The few times I complain to Amazon about a product, it's resolved in that one phone call, and I never have to go back to it. So, and also Amazon, Next, any of those people, you can track your delivery, you know where it's at, you know who's bringing it. It's like Uber, you know who's coming in the car, and they're all using current technology. So I believe that there's some of that the housing sector is really lagging behind on. Very simple, basic things, which the rest of us as consumers elsewhere take for granted. And I don't think it's that difficult. I'll have to look at Sheila, who's been in that role. Is it that difficult to adapt that to the housing sector? And I'll add one last thing, then I need a drink. One of the issues I also talk about is post-COVID, we've confused ourselves as employers. So we have all these sort of admin, officey, mobile phone, sort of writing letter kind of staff who can work remotely, work, what's the word? Whatever hours that suits them. You know, there's a word for it, I've forgotten now. Work remotely, flexibly is the word. But then on the other hand, we still insist that the people that we send around to do repairs do it between 9 and 5. And I see that as a total contradiction It's like, are we going one way or the other? So we've got half of the organisation that only performs between 9 and 5, and then we've got the rest of the world, customers who are working flexible hours, saying, well, I have to stay home between 9 and 5 because that's the time the guy's going to come. So I see that as a contradiction, and it means that we've not completely moved forward into this new era that COVID brought in rapidly. I'll end there.
Thank you very much, Lara. Obviously, a number of things to digest there, and just going to the chat. So, Rupert said, to Dave's point, processes aren't always documented, then you can't automate dud processes if they're in fact written down. And we talked a bit about AI. I can see going off in the chat regarding that one. Rupert said cybersecurity features lots of look ahead risk management, and Geraint said, I'd add that basics is also how can the repair journey be tracked internally, having been logged. I've been looking at complaints where I couldn't track something. And Akhlaq said, it surprises me this journey isn't tracked, and talks a little bit about some of the points Lara just made there. Shelley, there's a massive skill shortage. It's a massive one. We need to invest in consistently developing our people and having time set aside specifically for this. I completely agree with Sheila. We're always firefighting. The problem there is that money and salaries in the tech world have gone higher and higher and higher. We're struggling to keep up. And so people put up stuff like rent to cover off staff shortages. Then you're getting frustrations with tenants saying, why is our rent going up? And the cycle continues there, and trying to balance that out. Kai has said, when I listened to stage 2 complaints, 2 themes were always highlighted. The first is a systems issue with information not being transferred to the right places. The second is how that tenant was made to feel. Both in a way are basic concerns, but need a line between basic and innovation to work together. There was a question around AI and maintenance, and could there be a space for innovation and the art possible for boards and management teams? Asked David. Yes, I think we need to utilise our university, says Akhlaq. Cambridge, Oxford, Liverpool, JMU, Liverpool Uni are all doing things around social housing, but again, we work too siloed, and there's loads of little points that are coming through that I'll try and raise if I can, but we're going into the last few minutes. So what I want to do is give all of our panelists just a minute or so to really give an overview of where they think we are in terms of, having heard so many points today: basics, innovation, are we using the right terms? But more importantly, how do we help housing move forward? Because the thing I think we're all agreeing on is that the process in general need to move forward and need to evolve a bit. So Anne-Marie, over to you, I guess, for final thoughts on some of those points there.
Thanks, Matt. It's a riveting conversation today. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to talk about something slightly different in terms of my summary. It's just I work with boards a lot. I've been involved in quite a few boards over the last few years, and I'm not sure that we have the right conversations at that level in the organisation. That's where one of the problems arise. And I think, I'm not adverse to, housing associations, execs, then being on other board members. I'm doing that myself, so I'm not going to criticise too much. But do we have enough fresh blood? People coming from, say, service industries, technology, all those sort of things, to start injecting a slightly different conversation. Because if you're just going to look at a performance report at the board meetings every day, that just really devalues the conversation and the value that the board can add to things. So just going, oh, you must get just get that repairs number up, just do whatever you need to get that repairs number up. It's so inwardly focused. We are never going to be able to, do these things, whatever we end up calling them, or just thinking a bit wider, seeing what's out there in the world, the art of the possible. So I think that's really, for me, is a key thing, and having those right conversations, being challenged in the right way. One positive thing that I am seeing, I want to end on a positive, is that some housing associations are actually recognising that, and you can now see that there's recruitment in the market. The people come on board with that technology, also from a cybersecurity risk perspective, coming onto boards. And I can see also now there's a new trend for getting CTOs or CIOs sit on the executive teams of housing associations. Some have had them, more are getting them, understanding that having that people, that skill set and mindset to come and help the rest of us, because we need, diverse teams with different thoughts, ideas and skills to do the best for our organisations, is bringing that now onto that top table. So I'm going to be positive thinking that's a glimmer of change and hope for us and moving forward. And perhaps, we'll have a better conversation when we're all dialing in 10 years' time to see what's happened. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much, Anne-Marie. Sheila, over to you for final thoughts.
So the first thing I would say is I think the thing we need to not do is just take a process and use technology to make it different. I think that we need to be looking at the whole journey. This is about journey mapping. This is about not just assuming that what we do is the best way to do it. So it's literally almost like a blank piece of paper and say, okay, if we were going to do ASB from scratch, what would it look like? Because I think that's the mistake that some organizations have made, is like, oh, there's a new bit of tech, let's just bring that tech and, you know, just put our process into it. And that is absolutely not the way forward. It's about understanding what tech is available, what magic stuff is out there that could help us, but then it has to go back to, you know, what is it we're actually trying to achieve, and making that better. Definitely all about journey mapping, and not silo based either. I think one of the issues, I think, is that sometimes organisations take what the resources that they've got and try and make use of those, and I don't think that's going to help the situation either. I think, you know, there are different ways of working around, you know, being much more agile about things, you know, not implementing one big system or one big change, but doing things in small steps, but with a big picture. And that might mean different types of roles. I mean, there's roles out there around business analysts and product owners, and, you know, people that perhaps are not traditional roles for housing associations to actually run. I think the other risk would be is, don't let IT run it. It has to be run from the business and driven by the business, but with IT, obviously a huge IT support. And I think just, you know, I think there is light. I think that people are seeing things, and I think that staff are engaged. They have engaged with ChatGPT and, you know, working remotely and things, which they weren't doing a few years ago. So I think there is light, but I think I agree with Anne-Marie that I think it has to start at the top, and it has to be a whole different conversation about what is our organisation going to look like in 10 years' time. So it's not about sticking plasters. It's about how do we deliver that and how do we grow? So I think it's just about having lots of different conversations and bringing in people who are prepared to challenge the status quo.
Thank you very much, Sheila. And Lara, we've probably got about a minute or so left, so over to you for final thoughts.
All right, then, final thoughts, a couple of questions. It's okay for us to have these conversations, but my questions is for us to think about is how innovative, supportive, creative, agile are the organisations that influence what we do in the sector, in terms of people like the regulator, Homes England, HQN, HDN, the Social Housing Roundtable, etc., all those people who have influence in the sector. Are they as agile as we'd want them to be and innovative, and will they support us in doing what we need to do? The last thing I'd just say is the solution to the problem, as far as I'm concerned, is make sure we always have a tenant in the boardroom, so that we can see things from the tenant's perspective as well. I think every board, if I was in charge, every board would have a board member that's under the age of 25 in the boardroom, because then we get to keep up with what's going on in the rest of the world, because boardrooms are generally full of people in their 50s and 60s and 70s, and we have a certain experience of the world. Yes, David, we have a certain experience of the world, and we need to keep up with what the rest of the population is thinking and doing.
Thank you very much, Lara. Anne-Marie, Sheila, Lara, thank you so much for your insight and input today. David, I'm going to pass across to you final thoughts, but thank you for everybody for joining me today and for sharing in such insight, and for allowing me to host today's session. So Dave, over to you.
Well, first of all, and thank you, Matt, for hosting, and thanks very much, every so much. I can't speak because I've been listening for the last hour. I started off by giving everyone a warm welcome in what is a freezing cold day. And when we look at some of the basics and innovation you can get in housing, heating is one area. But I've written some, just to kind of end on the fact about innovation and what technology is being applied in the sector at the moment, to finish off quickly. We have rent predictive analytics being used across the sector now, which is helping people with arrears. We have repairs diagnostics that's using artificial intelligence. We have scheduling software that's using dynamic software scheduling tools. We have sensor technologies that are looking at heat, are looking at environment areas within houses. We have the customer voice and the type of work that somebody like Naomi Sweeting did at Grand Union, and now Places for People. So there is examples out there. But I just want to keep that debate going, folks. So we will summarise this up. It has been recorded. We will distribute it out, and hopefully we can get this discussion going more and more and more. But for now, a massive thank you to Lara, Anne-Marie, Sheila, and especially you, Matt. You will have noticed it was an all-female panel, so credit to that as well. Girl power. See you later, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
You.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Treat me like a dog. Treat me like a dog.